All right. Well, it looks like we have 10 attendees so far, which sounds like a great number to get started with. And then, of course, um, folks are welcome to join as their time allows. And of course, if you need to drop off, we'll be sharing a recording of the event afterwards. So welcome to everyone who's here. Tonight, we'll be talking about integrating inclusive teaching strategies into STEM classrooms, hosted by LabXchange, which is an initiative of Harvard Online. Before we get started, we'd love to get some interaction going in the chat with a little icebreaker. Please feel free to drop your location and your role in education, whether you're a high school teacher, middle school teacher, in the chat. And of course, feel free to drop any questions in the chat as well. And we will try to answer them. I know we have an hour together today, which will certainly go by quickly. I will kick it off, and I'll type my location in the chat as well as my role. All right. Looks like people might be tuning in and a little shy. I see Ken has raised hand. Ken, maybe I'm unmuting you. Is there
Hi, Ilyana. It looks like the
Hey,
chat on
Ken.
my screen is disabled here. I'm wondering.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Let me take a look at that. I apologize for that. All right. Well, the Q&A function is available, so please do feel free to put your questions in there, and I will try to figure out what is happening with our chat, and I apologize for that. We might have to rethink some of our icebreakers in the meantime, but I'll do my best. So in the interest of time, again, we'll get started. And then as I pass it off to my colleague, Julie, and I think we've lost Faye.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully she'll rejoin us momentarily. My name is Ilyana Sawka, and I'm Outreach and Communications Manager at LabXchange. Oh, and she's back. And I'm here with Julie Olson, who is a LabXchange teacher in residence and assistant professor of biological sciences at Dakota Wesleyan University. And oops, Faye Garner, teacher in residence at LabXchange and science research teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Julie and Faye.
Hi, I'm back. I'm sorry, my internet dropped right as we get started. So, and I can't get the video started again. So, Hi,
I will
everyone.
take care of that for you, Faye. All right,
Thanks.
so our agenda for today is how we can integrate inclusive teaching strategies into STEM classrooms. We'll talk a little bit about LabXchange and the RDEISE initiative, which is designed to advance equity in STEM. Uh, we'll talk about the importance of inclusive teaching approaches, which means actually a variety of strategies and techniques beyond sort of specifically discussing race in the science classroom. And we'll be sure to give you plenty of examples of those strategies as well. So what is LabXchange for those who are not familiar with our project? We are a global science classroom open to every curious mind. We were created at Harvard University with support from the Amgen Foundation, and we launched in 2020. So we've been around for about 4 years now. And we are both a platform for teaching and learning, a resource library of learning resources, and a community of educators, learners, scientists, scholars, and community members worldwide. Our goal is to expand access to high quality science learning and to give learners and educators everywhere the opportunity to chart a journey in science, whatever that may look like for them, and always to have access to those resources 100% for free. We now have about 30,000 science resources in our library. These are credible, vetted resources from around the world, from individual educators, like our colleague Ken Huff, who's on the call tonight, who creates peer investigations that align to NGSS, to organizations that I'm sure you're familiar with, like PhET and Khan Academy, and everything in between. Our team at LabXchange designs lab simulations and interactives that are designed to allow learners to experience the scientific process and the steps of scientific inquiry, as well as to engage with key concepts. And as I mentioned before, we're also a learning platform. And so we offer a dashboard that you can use to store and share your favorite resources, create classes, start discussions, and track progress. And finally, you can also access authoring tools, which means that LabXchange gives you the power to upload your own resources, create learning resources, remix learning pathways, and convene students and to personalize their online learning experience so that you can meet your students where they are. All right, and what is RDEISE? So RDEISE is the Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Science Education project, which is a project of LabXchange. We started working on the project in 2020, and it is composed of 2 clusters or collections of learning resources, the first of which is live now. It is Racism as a Public Health Crisis, which is designed for high school and college learners, but really applicable in a variety of contexts. And it expresses concepts and ideas of race in the context of science, medicine, and public health. So things like, is race biological? How does race manifest in the experience of accessing medical care in the US? And how does race impact our lived experiences based on our racial group in terms of environmental factors and pollution and other environmental factors. The second cluster is advancing equity in STEM through inclusive teaching, which is designed to be a toolkit for educators. This cluster is live as of September, and we're releasing pathways each week. And I'll be sure to follow up after the webinar with links to both clusters, as well as other ways that you can stay updated and access and peruse these materials. So it's important to talk about the origin of the project, especially given where and when it started. The RDEISE initiative began in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. Many STEM organizations and educational organizations were confronting difficult truths about who has privilege in these spaces and whose voices are heard. We wanted to be part of that conversation, but we wanted to do it in a way that was authentic and that empowered the people who are experts when it comes to racism, anti-racist education, and discussing topics of racism in STEM. And so the steering committee was assembled and made up of the 7 amazing individuals that you see here. And the steering committee led the work of 25 graduate and postdoctoral fellows who authored the content that make up the clusters. And the fellows come from HBCUs and other universities and institutions of higher learning around the US. And the LabXchange team took on the role of creating the digital experiences out of the curricular resources that were authored by the steering committee and graduate fellows. So the cluster that we'll be talking about today, Advancing Equity in STEM Through Inclusive Teaching, is composed of 7 pathways. You can see the topics here: addressing systemic racism, reducing barriers for students in STEM, promoting persistence, growth mindset, creating an inclusive classroom, culturally relevant pedagogies, and addressing systemic racism in STEM educational contexts. We'll be focusing today on creating an inclusive classroom, illustrated by a number of teaching strategies that Julie and Faye will walk us through. The 2 pathways that are available now are addressing systemic racism in STEM education and reducing barriers for students in STEM. And creating an inclusive classroom will be launching this month. So we're really excited to share those with all of you. All right, I know that the chat is having some issues right now, and I so apologize for that. We're hoping to hear from all of you about how you would define an inclusive STEM classroom. So rather than using the chat, if anyone is comfortable and would like to raise your hand, and you can speak and share with us what your definitions of an inclusive STEM classroom are. So let me pause there for a second while folks have a moment to think about what inclusive STEM classrooms mean to them. Okay, Yvonne, was that a hand raised, Yvonne? Would you like to speak? Let me allow you to speak and you can let us know if that was intentional. You should be able to speak if you'd like. All right, let's.
Chat is not open.
The chat is not open. That is right. We are having some technical difficulties, but if you'd like to respond to the prompt, feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can share that way.
I think I might be able to get if I click on each of theirs, there's the more and it says chat. So they might be able to chat now.
Sorry about that, everyone. Well, let's keep moving. And again, please do feel free to use the Q&A if you'd like to share a perspective. All right, so our working definition of an inclusive STEM classroom is a space where all students are able to receive equitable education, regardless of their abilities, their backgrounds, or learning preferences.
Okay. And that is my cue.
Thank you, Julie.
So yeah, there's obviously several characteristics. Again, students not only having opportunities, but actively trying to engage them, giving them skills to do that, making it really a conversation. And then making a personal connection, trying to have the lessons so it does mean something to them as well as the people around them, and giving them, having enough time, because deep thinking is not necessarily, they're used to a quick answer. And I think it's okay to let them know that it's okay to ask questions, okay to think and take time to really to do that. Being more open-ended, giving teachers ideas for not just one way to teach something, but many. And just, making it welcoming from the NGSS, that engaging in argumentation. It's not people being mad at each other, but it's really looking at the evidence and that meeting students at their level. Yeah, again, looking at race and disparities as part of the learning process, and really empowering teachers and their students. Let's see. Okay, so the importance of inclusive classroom in STEM. Again, that empowerment, a belonging within STEM. It's not just for certain people. It's also using STEM as evidence against the use of races, providing that evidence. We want more representation, more inclusive representation from all walks of life and different people, because they all bring, that those much needed viewpoints. And again, those ideas, that innovation that comes with that. There's a distinct connection between RDEISE resources and science topics, as well as NGSS performance expectations. The teaching guides are going to have pro tips. They're going to have the science and engineering practices, the cross-cutting concepts too, that apply. So again, lots of connections throughout that are very, very useful.
All right. Oh, are we on the class?
I apologize. That is entirely me.
It's all good.
Fairly, go for it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. How are you today? So one of the things that you have access to on the site is talking about inclusive strategy, which is how you arrange the classroom. And as teachers, you know that you have to be thoughtful about how you actually put your classroom together. It can have an impact in the environment for the students. So as you're putting your room together or rearranging your room, you're thinking about these inclusive arrangements where you really want to think about how can the students engage with you, how can they engage with the content, and how can they engage with other students. So in this asset, you can intentionally think about how can I arrange it? Is it just rows? Is that the way that works? Or can I put it in another way so that teachers and students can have more um, interaction with each other? One of the cool things about this is a strategy that is right within your control. It is also something that you can review often. And in the end, it really gives students an opportunity to feel more like they belong in the classroom and to give them more opportunities to collaborate with a diverse group of classmates. And I think I'm going to drop that asset in the chat. Is that okay, Ilyana?
Please do, Faye. Thank you.
Okay, and if you click on that, you would actually see um, that it kind of guides you through the process, and it's a thinking guide. So what works for your classroom, what can work for your classroom. So that's one of the things that we have available for you guys. This is the next one. Inclusive strategies, as in classroom management, has to do with, again, things that help students feel like they belong in the classroom. So when you're thinking about how am I interacting with my students, something as simple as taking the time to pronounce the students' names correctly, right? Asking them specifically, how do you pronounce your name? Or if they do tell you how to pronounce their name, really work hard on trying to remember. It makes the student feel like you really are listening to them. Intentionally taking the time to give students praise. And really taking information in from the students, that thinking about how is this working, not just for me, but is it really working for them? And yeah, as we know, students can be vocal. And a lot of times as they're giving us this information, right? That information, we take it into consideration and really think about how is the students feeling when they are in our classroom? Are they feeling respected? Are they being treated equally? And do they have a sense of belonging in that classroom? Okay. This is an asset that I just worked on myself. It's literally in play right now. I just finished that last week. The idea of stereotype threat. We all know what a stereotype is, right? And in the asset that I wrote, there is a caricature of what does it mean to be a scientist, right? Everybody thinks of the lab coat, the white hair, glasses, kind of awkward person. And if a student is sitting in a science classroom and they don't feel like they fit what that stereotype looks like, it can have an impact on the student's performance. They can feel, especially if they are one of a few, right? They can have that anxiety where they feel like they're at risk of confirming that negative stereotype, right? If they get something wrong, that they're going to be the ones that make everyone think that things are, you know, that all people like me don't belong here. And even the small things, subtle cues, can trigger an outsized response. And this is based in research. And in this asset, there's actually a lot of research out there about how can you address this stereotype threat and help students feel more connected and also feel like they can do. So an example that can create a classroom that enhances that stereotype threat for students is if a student does well and being surprised, like, oh, wow, you know, like, I can't believe you got that. Or having a classroom where they don't provide examples where the student feels like they're included, right? And that part actually was really interesting to me because it's not just having a poster on the wall, but it's also about having students feel like the person they can actually relate to the person that's being shown and addressed, right? It could also be maybe a community member having examples that are a little bit more deep than just a poster on the wall. And also, again, being the only representative of a racial group in the class, there are ways, and in the asset that I wrote addresses all of the different things that you can do to really help address that stereotype threat. Yep.
Thank you, Faye. All right, now the chat is working. Zoom 101. I apologize, everyone. It's a little embarrassing. But the chat is working now, and I see some responses in there. It's so cool to see that folks are coming to us tonight from Virgin Islands, from Canada, New York, everywhere in between. Great to have you again. So, what are some active learning strategies that you have used in the past? What does active learning strategy mean to you? In your teaching context also, because I see that we have elementary school, we have middle school, um, we have an informal teaching environment. So do feel free to drop anything that you've used or heard of in the chat. And if it's not ringing any bells for you tonight, then we actually, oh, I see Regina has shared to host some panelists. I use POGILs in my class where students look at models and construct their knowledge in small groups.
Yep, Pogles. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That is a great example. And I will jump right in. So active learning strategies promote engagement. Again, exactly, ensuring phenomena are culturally relevant for students. Another great example. All right.
Let's see. For some reason, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint, but I've got it kind of pulled up here too. Okay, so inclusive strategies, some of the teaching techniques. Again, we want to promote engagement. We want to help make the lesson content relevant. And so the teaching guides are going to have a lot of those different components in there, up to different ways of assessment, both formal and informal summative assessments too. And so just some of the different things are asking open-ended questions. And if students aren't willing to openly share, again, it's building that confidence and making it a normal part of the class. So there's a lot of different strategies and techniques that are included. Giving students time, as we said, because again, you're asking them to do some deep thinking and to really survey what's going on there, using again varied active learning strategies, and a lot of these are ones that we're going to go over. So one of the ones that I've used are the KWL charts, and this one, it shows up actually in a couple of different places. And there are a lot of different ways you can do this. You can give the students their own, and just again, that time. So what do you know about this topic? So one of them that I recently worked on dealt with water quality, the water cycle, water quality, and some of the disparities. And so what do they know? What do you want to know? And a lot of these are going to pose a world problem, or it could be a local problem too. And then what did you learn? And so one of the things that's kind of neat is to watch students think about, okay, well, we had this question and now we just answered it. It might have been a think, pair, share. It might have been a video, it might have been a RDEISE or a LabXchange resource. And they go, okay, but then sometimes they're going to figure out, oh, but now we have more questions. And so it could be on their own piece of paper. It could be on a whiteboard. It could be using magnets so you can actually move these around, giving students sticky notes to put ideas on, and put them in. And really, you're teaching them to evaluate their own learning. And that, which is really a powerful tool for them.
I'm muted. Another thing that active learning strategy that you can use is anonymous polling. It's really good. It's really a great way to survey your class pretty instantly. Sometimes you can do it before class to kind of see where students are. You can, in the beginning of class, you can do it at the end of class to see whether or not students have got it. And there are websites out there, Kahoot, quizzes, or if you have interactive clickers. It's the cool part of it being anonymous is that you're not looking for an individual student, but just like you see in this graph, you're looking for the trends. So that can tell you, all right, everybody got it. I can move on to the next thing, or maybe they didn't get it. I need to do some reteaching and help with some misconceptions. Really, it's about helping inform teachers on the next steps in their instruction. And it's inclusive because, again, it doesn't point out one student, it gives you a class um, perspective, right? It engages students to think more about the course material. And again, because students aren't singled out, you will probably get a more accurate impression of what students think and know.
Okay, so another strategy is concept mapping. And there are tools out there, but I like to use the concept mapping to help students see the connections between different ideas. It's not just this siloed learning. And so, again, this is a tool that I used in the water quality teaching guide. And I suggest using this at the beginning of that one for just assessing, just seeing what students already know about the water quality cycle, and different factors with that. And then adding to that, asking them, okay, where does this fit in? It's again, it's one of those ongoing organizational tools. And you can use it for any kind of lesson. You could use it for a summative assessment too. And again, it allows students to put their thoughts to paper or even electronic, what they think. Some are going to use more illustrations. Some are going to use more words, a mix of them. And yeah, they're good. They're going to look messy sometimes, but it's their thoughts and cognitive learning there too. It can help them organize for projects, for trying to answer those tough questions. Single students, you can have, I've done concept maps where if you have the like lab benches in science rooms, they always have those dark counters. And I've used chalk markers and they actually write right on there and they go, okay, now go around to somebody else's. Do you want to add or do you want to subtract? Do you want to make a comment, about their map that they drew this, or it could be a group map. So, and then that chalk marker just wipes right off. So it really, they really, really like doing that.
All right, so another active learning strategy is a jigsaw. If you haven't done this before, this is a really dynamic strategy that teachers can use when giving students ownership of a piece of the learning. So the idea is that you take, for example, if you have about 3 readings, and I actually did an asset where students took different parts of a pathway in learning about DNA and how it works. And in groups, they will explore their portion of the learning. And then in each group, so let's say there are 5 groups, then you will mix the groups up so that you have a group of each expert, and that student, after in their small groups come up with the most important points, they can now be experts and share with the rest of the students that didn't do that part. So this really gives students that ownership. It requires students' cooperation, and it really does leverage that peer learning. It improves students' motivation and reducing student prejudice. Because again, in those small groups, the student may not be, maybe their reading isn't the best, or as they're talking with their small groups, they're learning about what to say. So now they're equipped with something and they can go to that next step when they're mixed up and have something to say that came from the group. It gives every student a role to teach students, and it gives time to and space for student voice. So a student that may not have usually raise their hand, that student that may not, that tries to hide in the back. Now everyone has to be engaged. So when they're in their jigsaw groups, they all have to give the points that were created in the expert groups. So how I usually like to do this is, let's say a student, each group has a reading or something that they have to, a video they have to look at. They should come out of their expert groups with 3 or 4 points that they deem are the most important. Of course, the teacher could check, make sure, maybe help them if there's something that they think is missing. And then that way, that information is disseminated without you having to be in front of the class and saying everything. So it's a really powerful tool, and then the students don't have to go through everything. They can also learn from each other. So that's really, I think the jigsaw is one of those really powerful and simple things, because for me, with all of these strategies, it's all about what you can do with what you already have. So you may have a reading with 5 paragraphs. You may have a couple videos you want them to watch. You split it up, and it's a different way of getting students to get that information.
Okay. Another strategy is think, pair, share. And a lot of students are often hesitant to talk in front of a large group. So this kind of, again, they're thinking themselves, share, pairing up with someone. Again, I think that small group helps a lot. This also teaches them to listen, to be good listeners. So it's giving them a voice, and it's going to gradually expose them to larger and larger groups. So it is very similar, I think, to the jigsawing. Think, pair, share can be used a lot like jigsawing. It pretty much resembles that. But it also encourages questions. You can use the KWL chart with this. Each phase has its own benefits. The think phase gives every student time to fully process the question. And again, that time factor. And without it being really a race to raise their hand. We all have that, again, students not wanting to raise their hand, not wanting to be wrong or singled out. Again, putting it in their court first there. The pair provides every student the opportunity to put their thinking into their own words, then comparing their answers with the peer, discussing it. Again, that argumentation, what's our evidence? If students agree with one another during that phase, it can allow them to continue building confidence, but also being able to debate why they think the way they do. Again, that confidence building, that skill building that is going hand in hand. And so it can also motivate them to ask more questions. So you think's different from me. So why? Or maybe we need to ask more questions. And then during the share, this involves high levels of student participation, obviously. This is because the think and pair phases have helped the students collect their thoughts. They've organized them. They've collected probably more evidence. They may feel like they have someone that has the same thought processes of them, again, building that confidence. And also gives the instructor the opportunity to hear how multiple students arrived at their answers. This allows the instructor to give targeted feedback. Also, is there other learning that needs to take place, or are there other resources that need to be provided? And then making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page as far as that learning process.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you, Faye. I think that actually wraps up our very quick but insightful look into some active teaching strategies and inclusive teaching strategies that you can use in your classroom. And I also wanted to, again, shout out that this pathway, this collection of learning resources that Julie and Faye and others have contributed to, is going to be live on LabXchange this month. And maybe Faye or Julie, if you have access to the notes for this slide, we actually have quite a few of the resources available for you to preview. They are still in private mode. So you will need to create a LabXchange educator account if you don't have one already. It's totally free and fairly quick to make one, and that will allow you to view these resources a little early before they go fully live. And of course, it also opens up all of the other LabXchange features that I shared earlier in our chat. Thank you so much, Faye, for putting those links into the chat. And of course, I will follow up by email with everyone who is with us tonight to share a little bit more guidance and links to some of the things that we've discussed tonight. All right. I think this is still me. So creating an inclusive STEM classroom, just to sort of sum up some of the things that we chatted about. You can start with your classroom arrangement to create a welcoming physical space. Your classroom management, as the educator, as the instructor, ensures that all students are treated equally. And then, of course, we heard about some fantastic teaching techniques: anonymous polling, concept mapping, jigsaw, think, pair, share, concept mapping, KWL charts, and much more. These are all great things to have in your toolkit to promote engagement by and with all of the students in your class. All right, so we wanted to make sure that we leave plenty of time for any questions or comments from the folks that joined us here tonight. Before we do that, I want to thank Julie and Faye again for taking the time to present this webinar for us tonight, and of course to be such valuable members of the LabXchange team and the LabXchange project. We're so grateful for your time and your insights.
Thank you. It's been a great project so far.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just the process of getting to review, like Faye has created some amazing teaching guides, dealing with, not only the science, but also the like hair type. And, I had water quality and health disparities, and there's hopefully some really, hopefully people are going to find that these are really useful and helpful, but and then all of the different ideas for inclusive classrooms that I myself didn't really think about but after I read Faye's lessons, it's like, wow, there's lots of very useful things.
So Faye and Julie, actually, while we wait to see if anyone else has any questions, I would actually love to hear from both of you. And I apologize, I should have done this before we started the presentation. But it would be wonderful to hear a little bit more about each of you, your journey in teaching, as well as your journey to working for RDEISE and with LabXchange.
Yeah,
Hey, want to kick us
yeah,
off? Thanks.
yeah, I'll kick off. Yeah, I'm a science, currently a science resource teacher at in Fairfax County Public Schools, and I do coach teachers on, and the cool thing about this is really helpful in my job because it's like, you could try this, you could try this in your classroom. I have been teaching. I taught for about 20 years now. Started teaching in high school and middle school. Didn't start off as a teacher though. I started off working in biotech and ended up in teaching due to some family situations, but I really love science. It's like my thing. So I love seeing when students can have a question or see something that they have no clue what it is, and by the end they're like, oh, I got that, it makes sense to me. And it's really been a cool experience for me. The last 11 years or so I taught chemistry mostly, at the high school level, and biology, as well as coach students in like science olympiad and other fun STEM things. I actually got into this project. I before this, I worked on uh it's called Unlocking Life's Code, which with the NIH, and Henrietta Lacks, thinking about making teaching guides for around the Henrietta Lacks life and story, and how we can incorporate that into lessons. And through that, I got connections to LabXchange, and I'm kind of doing the same thing, but now it's about thinking about inclusive practices. So I spend my a lot of building some of these lessons, like here's how you would actually put a jigsaw into a lesson. And my idea is to get teachers to really visualize. It's not just a thing, it's actually a thing I can do. So when I'm doing my writing and thought processes, is always thinking about how can teachers actually make this practical? Because all of these are great, but if you can't actually see yourself doing it or figuring out a way to do it, or make it feels like a burden to do, I think it's hard for teachers to incorporate. So it's been really cool the last few months, working on this project, and we have quite a bit more to go. So I'm excited about where we're going with this. So please, when everything goes live, of course, give feedback, but I'm hoping that you guys really um, can see yourselves like, oh, I can do this type of lesson for myself. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Faye. Go for it, Julie.
Okay. Yeah, Julie Olson. I just switched jobs, so I am now an assistant professor. I don't really get the name. You still teach at the university level. But then 3 years before that, I was teaching at the technical college level. And before that, I've worn many hats. I taught 7 years for alternative school for at-risk students, as well as teaching dual credit biology. And then 25 years at the high school level, just teaching every science that there is, and a little bit of math when I first started out. So lots of different hats. Been an adjunct for a couple of universities. I have worked. I was blessed to be part of the NGSS writing team for life sciences. So that's where I met Kenneth, and he told me about RDEISE and put my name in, and it's really been an amazing experience so far, just making the different connections, because that's one of the things that's my thing, is to somebody comes and goes, so how can I use this, or what can I use to make this a more meaningful lesson, in different ways. I love to do the problem solving and different ways of teaching and connections. I even ask my students, I go, what class have you ever taken that would not apply to, I don't know, let's say like the environment, and they can't come up with anything. Because I just go, oh, nope, it's this and this. So all these connections, plus getting them to know that the more connections you make mentally, the more likely you're going to remember and be able to apply that information and that's what we want, to be the problem solvers, have those voices. So.
And I'm going to jump in and say that when you read some of the way Julie puts her lessons together, she really likes to think about how you a lot of these project-based assets. So you'll see some ways that you can have students do some of with these inclusive practices, but also see how you can get them to incorporate some of these assets into bigger projects. And that's really been interesting too. Be like, oh yeah, that'd be really cool. So all of these have been, it's just hopefully, thank you guys for uh, the information. Hopefully you can really see yourself using these assets.
I just want to add one more thing too, is with the advent, and we're not going to get rid of AI, assessment needs to change. It's going to have to evolve. And so engaging students in conversations where they have to what they learned. And, I think that there's going to be a lot of very useful things that come out of this that are already there. They're going to give teachers ideas for how do you assess that the student learned? How do you make that learning visible? So
That's a fantastic insight. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, Faye. So please do feel free to drop any questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And in the meantime, I'd actually love to sort of follow up on Julie and Faye's sort of comments about how they made their way to LabXchange. Julie mentioned Kenneth, who's our third teacher in residence. So just as an aside, LabXchange is very much a community. And so for the educators that have joined us tonight, we really do encourage you to reach out, whether you have follow-up questions about any of the strategies that we've shared tonight, or if you'd like additional information about LabXchange, how LabXchange could be useful in your teaching context. Again, whether that's middle school, informal, high school, community college, we would love to connect and set up some time to walk through what LabXchange offers. And then finally, LabXchange is really committed to empowering teachers. We launched in 2020. It was the start of COVID. Everyone was scrambling to move teaching online. And I just vividly remember a comment that was made about whether online learning and resources like LabXchange were thinking about replacing teachers. And we have always felt strongly that nothing online, digital, AI can replace teachers and the work that they do virtually, hybrid, in real physical classrooms. So LabXchange is committed to empowering and including teachers in everything that we do. And so there are many ways to get involved. And I would love to share more about that if anyone is interested, whether that is becoming part of our teacher ambassador community, whether it's sharing LabXchange in your network, sharing your story and the stories of perhaps others in your community, whether it's students that have gone on to pursue STEM or other sort of unique stories from the STEM space, whatever that may look like. I have put my email address here. Please don't hesitate to send me a line with any ideas, questions, or comments that come to mind. Perhaps once you've had time to digest what we've chatted about tonight. Of course, equity.labexchange.org is where you can access all of the information about RDEISE, including the links to the cluster that's live and the pathways that will be coming soon. On the left here, I actually have a QR code for the RDEISE pledge. We would love to know that there are educators and community members out there that support and agree with our mission of removing barriers to equitable access to STEM education and to transforming the structures that perpetuate racial inequity in the US and beyond. So do feel free to snap a photo of that on your phone and sign the pledge. And you can also input your email address and give us more information. And we'll send you more info and stay in touch as well. All right. So with that, I know that everybody is in a completely different time zone. I think some people are joining us early in the morning, I assume, in the Philippines, and you know, in the central US and wherever else everyone is joining us here on the East Coast. We're looking forward to wrapping up our day of work. And so I will stay on for a couple more minutes, but other than that, please join me in thanking Julie and Faye for their time tonight, for their incredible insights, and please do connect and stay tuned for the resources that they've designed for the project. And we'll be sure to share more about that on our blog, on our social media, and on our newsletter as well. All right.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks, Yvonne. So you said that, Yvonne, with the A. Accent.
All right. Glad to hear that the webinar was rewarding. Thank you so much again. I'm going to stop recording